I'm happy to have with us today Dr. Ray Nannis, and we're going to have some wonderful conversation about what he does to support people in their health and well-being, as well as his experience with Fred Van Liew and the incredible products and services that he provides people. So thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So first, maybe you could just tell everybody what exactly, you're obviously a doctor, and tell them what area you practice in and what you provide for people, if you would.
All right. Well, I'm a chiropractor, and I graduated Parker College of Chiropractic September of 1995. I've been open in Richardson, Texas since 1997. And I really consider myself somewhat of a technique junkie. I practice somewhere in the neighborhood of 25, 26 different chiropractic techniques, because what I found is the longer that I've been in practice, I was attracting different people. At first it was relatively easier patients, and then they became harder and harder and more challenging. And
as far as the things that they were challenging.
As far as what they'd walk in the office with, it's not just back pain. You know, a lot of people think chiropractic and back pain are just headaches if they're kind of really out there. But I was getting people with digestive problems and allergy problems and just a variety of different things. You name the health problem for the most part, and I've probably worked with it. Even patients with cerebral palsy and some genetic disorders, you name it. But what happened was, as I progressed in practice, I'd get a case that whatever I knew how to do wouldn't work with. And it would keep me up at night. I'd be frustrated with it. So although we learned, I think, about 8 techniques in school, I was always interested in finding something else. I think I graduated with school with the idea that chiropractic was very a manual, physical thing. It was about moving a bone off a nerve and letting the body do all of the work, which is still, that part's true. The body does all the healing. But what I was finding is just the physical adjustment was not enough. So I just broadened horizons. I went from just a segmental model to moving into more how the entire spine works. And then from how the entire spine works to how the entire body is working with that. So along the way, I've learned a couple of dozen different chiropractic techniques. And that gives me the opportunity to work with anybody from maybe an athlete, maybe an infant, all the way up to people in their 90s. I haven't had any patients over 100 yet, but I'm working on that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I think, it's incredible because, really what you're trying to do is to serve people and help them feel better. And, I think we all realize that when people are physically feeling better, they operate better in their lives, and manifesting the things that they desire and fulfilling whatever purpose that they have in their lives. And I think one of the things that we wanted to talk about as you're here is that what's wonderful is that you, as a professional, and what I hear in you, which I really respect, is that you're always searching for more education about how you can serve people at a higher level. And I know that one of the people that is one of your business associates, friends, colleagues, is Fred Van Liew. And you have started incorporating some of the techniques that you have learned through him and what he provides. And maybe you could just share a little bit about how you met and why you were drawn to what he was teaching.
Well, actually, I met Fred Van Liew in, I think, 1991 when I was a freshman chiropractic student. He came to the seminars, and he was considered the water doctor, and really that's all I knew him for at that point. I fell in love with his systems back then about how important water is, because one of the teachings we talk about all the time is how important water is as far as just general healing. And people simply won't heal if they're dehydrated. And there's so many chemicals just in the city tap water, and even so many very poor quality filters. I decided a long time ago that I wanted those filters for me, myself, my family, and I've encouraged many patients to get them. I wish more of them would, but many of them do. Personally, I have the full house system, and that's where I started with it.
Oh, could you just explain? Because I think there are people that think, I'll go buy some bottled water. Why would I need a shower filter? Or why would I need a whole house filter? And I was exposed to this concept 20 years ago, so I have my own experience, but maybe you could share, why? Why as a from a professional standpoint and a personal standpoint?
Right. Well, one of the things that I teach, kind of my standard is I talk about it's the owner's manual for the human body. I'm not totally sure I coined it. I may have stole it from somebody, but unfortunately I can't remember who. So I like to take claim for it. And what I say is it's oxygen, water, nutrition, a healthy functioning nervous system, exercise, rest, and then I add a positive mental attitude. And I know I had to misspell owners a little bit with 2 N's in there. Mm-hmm. But that's kind of my standard workshop, if you will.
Right.
When I was in my second semester of chiropractic college, we were in biochemistry. I had Dr. Srinivasan. He was an Indian professor, and I'll be honest, I don't think I understood 5 words the guy said. But somewhere along the way, something clicked with me that every single chemical reaction that happens in the body requires water. And there's thousands and thousands and thousands of chemical reactions happening at any given moment.
Right.
Well, I looked at what I was doing at the time, and I would come to school with a 6-pack of Diet Coke, which was now I'm almost appalled that I did that, just to be able to get through school because I was drinking that much caffeine and I really wasn't even consuming any water. But something hit me in that class that let me know how important water really was for the body, because it's assumed, even when we're writing out the chemical reactions and all the detail on paper, what have you. So I basically quit drinking Coke and Diet Coke when I was drinking a ton of the stuff. Cold turkey, went through the full withdrawal. I've never been on any drugs in my life other than caffeine, never smoked a cigarette or anything like that.
Right.
But I was on so much caffeine, it was incredible. And I went through full detox reaction, and I thought what was going to happen is my system would just crash because I was so used to, well, I'd wake up in the morning, I'd have a Coke on the way to school, and I'd have 2 or 3 before lunch, and I'd have 1 or 2 with lunch, and by the time the day was in, there was a lot of diet soda.
Right.
Anyways, once I got past the detox, all of a sudden my energy started improving. And I just replaced the soda I was drinking with water, and then for the most part, that's really all I drink, because our body needs water, not iced tea, Coca-Cola, and coffee. Mm-hmm. I always like the analogy of, if you've ever seen a fishbowl, what happens if the fish, what would happen if you dumped Coca-Cola into the fishbowl?
Right.
The fish would die. I ask all my patients, do you ever do laundry at your house? And then usually joke with them, say, well, come by my house if you do. But what would happen if you put iced tea, Coca-Cola, coffee in the laundry? The clothes are going to come out dirty. Well, water is so important for every reaction. It's a cleansing product in the body. And if we don't put clean water in, there's no way in the world our system's going to run right. Mm-hmm. Because we really live and die at the cellular level. So if we have unhealthy material around the cell, unhealthy liquids, then there's no way in the world the cells are going to function right, because the cells end up closing down. They get into a very stressed mode. And then on a cellular level, we actually kick on really the adrenal response. And we live in a society today where there's so much stress, there's so much that we have to do, there's so many things that we have to do on a day-to-day basis, that the outside environment's kicking us into adrenal stress. If our inside environment's doing it, this is the reason that we end up with things like Syndrome X and all the ADHD problems with kids. And, well, it's one of the reasons. There's a whole list of them, but obviously the toxin load, and fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, and the list can go on and on. It's all of the diagnoses that the medical doctor might give somebody that they don't really have an answer for. They could throw drugs at these people to cover up various symptoms, but that seems to just make them sicker and more sick and more sick and more sick.
Right.
So,
well, when it comes to I'm sorry to interrupt you, but because I don't want to forget to address this issue because we're talking about so many different areas, but when it comes to the water, I think I would like to have you explain. People don't understand. We were talking about the whole house filter and how you felt the need and that it was essential for you to have filtration once you first understood, what was happening. And maybe you can explain to the viewers, why do they need a whole house filter? Why do they need a shower filter? Because most people think that the water coming in the house is fine to shower in and to bathe in.
Absolutely. Well, I saw a demonstration one time where someone took a cup of water and they took the pool chemical that tests for chlorine. just chlorine. And out of everything that's in the water, there's like 2,000 chemicals, maybe a lot more than that. That's a fairly old number.
Orthotol something, yeah.
But I saw someone take a glass of water and just put a couple of drops of that solution that they test the pool with for chlorine, and it turned the water bright yellow. I saw them take another cup of water from a sink, put it in their mouth, swish it around for just a second, spit the water back out, okay, maybe a little gross, put the chlorine drops in it, the water was totally clear. Where did the chlorine go? It had to be absorbed into that person that fast.
Oh, wow, right.
Well, I think what a lot of people tend to forget is that our skin is pretty much it is the biggest organ in our body. It is primarily a detox organ. It's also an immune system organ. There's a crossover there. It is what keeps the outside out and the inside in. But the skin is actually not a solid material. It's pores, and we hear about that all the time. It's how come when we were teenagers we get all the blemishes and things like that, because those pores can get clogged and everything. But if you can take a shower, the way that an industry gets rid of toxins is they aerate it. They'll take water and they'll aerate it. Now, they can use that to water their grass. You know what? The grass is probably fine, as long as nothing's eating that grass. But that's how industry gets rid of chemicals, is they aerate it. Well, if we want the pores to open up, we heat the body, which is why we might want to do something like a sauna or something along that line, because that opens up the pores that allows us to sweat. Well, I don't know about you, but I love to take a nice hot shower.
Yeah, I do too.
And
like most people.
Most people do. I've had too many times in my life where I've had to take that cold shower back in Boy Scout camps and stuff like that. And although the clean part was nice, the shower was not enjoyable.
Yeah.
Even when it's 100 degrees outside. So what do? We put ourselves in a contained room. We close the vapor lock on it, basically, by either pulling the curtain or shutting the glass door.
Right.
We aerate the water, and then we heat up the room, and then we're breathing that stuff, number one.
Right.
And number two, it's being absorbed right into our body. So the stuff that we're physically coming in contact with, the stuff that we're cooking with, all of these things, the more toxin that's in the water, it's got to go somewhere. Some of it's going to stay in the water, go down the drain, but a good portion of it's going to be absorbed right into our body, because we're giving ourselves all of the things, the opportunity for our body to absorb those, opening up the pores and aerating the chemicals right out of the water.
Right.
The stuff that we're going to be in contact with, just washing dishes and things along that line, stuff that you're going to have your hands in, all of those are a big problem. Now, obviously, the stuff we're flushing down the toilet, no big deal, but most of the water that's in our house, we really do come in close contact with it. Then in addition to that, there's the stuff we're going to be eating, drinking, and cooking with. So we have the whole house system that's going to give us quite a lot of protection. It's going to get rid of a lot of the toxins. And one of the unique things about Fred Van Liew's system, I'm not going to say that nobody else offers it because I haven't looked at every system out there, but it's the only one that I know of. Every one of his systems also deals with the energetics of the water. And that's really a unique topic. There's a whole history of about 200 years of a healing art called homeopathy. And what they do with homeopathy is they take little finite amounts of whatever it is. Let's say somebody has an arsenic poisoning, they'll add arsenic to water, or they could use an alcohol solution, what have you. And then they're going to dilute that. They're going to dilute it 100 to 1 multiple times, 15, 20, maybe 30 times, sometimes thousands of times. But each dilution actually makes the homeopathic medicine stronger, because our body is so powerful. Our body has an innate ability to know exactly what's going on, and when you add the smallest amount of something, it like turns something on inside the body. Well, what's happening in our water systems today is, number one, they're dumping all sorts of toxins into the water. All of our water systems in America, at least, probably around the world, are toxic with chemicals from drugs that people have consumed, passed through their body, or just disposed down the toilet. Horrible idea, but that's what a lot of people do. In fact, it's what they tell you to do when you're disposing. Is flush them down the toilet.
Right.
So these are in our water systems. They're inescapable. They may be in micro or minute amounts, but remember, the more you dilute something, the stronger it actually can have an impact on the body. Fred Van Liew's system, number one, has the ability to cleanse most of those drugs out, but most filters don't have the ability to cleanse the energetics of the water out.
I have no. Okay, can you define that? Because people listening to you may go, "What is that?"
Sorry.
No, but I'm saying
absolutely. what happens is water takes on a memory of everything it comes in contact with. Now, nature has a way to get rid of the memory, to erase the memory. Unfortunately, most of the water isn't in the nature system. But for everything that the water comes in contact with, other people, chemicals, drugs, pretty much anything out there, even if you could cleanse the water of the physical chemicals, it's going to retain the memory of it. I believe it's Dr. Emoto's work, the memory or the emotion of water. And it's becoming a lot more popular. I've heard a lot more people talking about it, and it's something I've been following for a long time. What Dr. Emoto basically did is he would put the word love or the word hate on water, and you'd get either this beautiful crystal when he froze it, or you'd get this decomposing looking mess, depending on what was happening with the energetics. Now, that was just a word put on the outside of a bottle. I'm talking about things that have been physically in contact with this.
Right.
So anything the water becomes in physical contact with, it's going to retain a memory. And when it retains that memory, it's going to impact whatever else that water comes in contact with, whether that be the inside or the outside of our body. So that being said, even the best filters available, and there's some amazing filters out there, but there's a lot of junk filters too.
Right.
But even great filters that are filtering out the chemical component of it, I've never seen any other system other than Fred Van Liew's system where he's actually working on unmemorizing, having the water lose its memory of the things it's become in contact.
It's come in contact with that was toxic.
Right.
Basically. Okay.
So nature has a natural way of doing that.
Right.
And number one, basically things are evaporated up and then rain down onto a mountain, down a river, and as the water goes down through the river, it's going to pick up minerals and it's going to dump toxins and it's going to dump the genetic memory as the water molecules bump around.
Right.
Fred Van Liew's systems have a couple of things available to do to help our water do that. And depending on what we're doing with the water, there's higher and higher levels of basically getting rid of the number one, toxins, but number two, the memory that's contained in the water.
So, okay, and so when you put your system in, because obviously you have a lot of knowledge, more than the average person, about what's actually happening inside the water. But let's just talk about just the experience of how it feels, you know, the water itself and maybe what it does for you physically. You know, people have experienced a change in their skin, their hair. I mean, maybe you could just comment on that, just from a personal perspective.
Absolutely. As a male, I probably have never spent that much time personally thinking about how my skin or my hair feel. It's just not been something that's been important to me. I put the water filter system into my body, put the shower system, the water shower system into my house, and in about 3 or 4 days, all of a sudden, I noticed, I was touching my skin. I was like, there's something different. My skin feels tingly. It feels like it's alive. It feels like it's open. It feels like my skin has energy, as opposed to something that I had never thought of before.
Right.
I don't use a lot of products because I don't like the chemicals from them. So, I mean, obviously I've used shampoos and soaps, but I try to minimize even that. But I noticed that my hair's softer after the water shower, after the filter. I'm not one that travels with the water filter particularly, so I noticed the difference. And we just spent a couple of days in Pennsylvania to visit, family, and we're showering in those shower filters, and I was noticing that something feels different just because of a couple of showers, and you can actually physically feel the difference. It's actually pretty unique with that. One of the challenges I have personally, like I said, I didn't like drinking water. I was drinking lots of soda. But I was forcing myself to drink water. It's so much easier when the water tastes good. Yes. So there's a taste to it that's undeniable. And of course, in my house, we have the outside whole house system. We have the inside reverse osmosis system. And then we have the Vitalizer Plus, which is the thing that helps totally get rid of the negative energy of the water. Adds minerals back into the water and adds oxygen back into the water. And as you're drinking it, as you're consuming it, you just feel more energetic. So it's kind of a benefit from every way that you look at it, from the way that you feel, the way that you even think clearer.
Do you think that takes immediate, a couple of days? I mean, what do you think your experience?
I think most people will notice something immediately, but within 2 to 3 days, you're really going to start to notice a difference.
Right.
And the biggest difference, of course, is when you step away from it after that you're used to it.
And then you go on a trip somewhere and whatnot if you don't take it with you.
Exactly.
And that's the nice thing, is that it is available to travel with if you choose to do so.
Right.
So, well, that's great. I appreciate you sharing that, as I say, from a professional standpoint and just from a personal standpoint. So maybe we could talk a little bit about some of the other things that you've been exposed to as far as the BSA training that you have had an experience, with Fred. Can you talk a little bit about what that is and how it's benefited, you and your profession?
Absolutely. Well, as I said when we got started, I've been a technique junkie, and I was always looking for techniques to help me get people better. Because I would get to the point that no matter what I'm doing, there's a frustration level because there's always that next patient that doesn't want to get better. I believe I was calling to find out about a water system or something along that lines. I needed to change my water filter out or what have you. And Fred answered the phone and said, "We have a seminar happening this weekend, and it's here in Dallas. I'm in Richardson, so my office is just across the street from here." He says, it's whatever it was, and come by. And so I did. I had no idea what I was expecting. I figured it would just be another kind of rah-rah session or maybe a technique, and at some point or another I kind of feel like I've been there, done that, seen them all.
Right.
I knew the teacher was actually one of my instructors, Dr. Robert Hyman. He was one of my instructors back when I was in school. As far as I know, he's not teaching at the college anymore, but he's in private practice again. And Dr. Hyman's he's really got an amazing sense of humor. He's so intelligent. It's just, he's a great presenter. I remembered enjoying his classes. I remembered he was a wealth of information. So I was pretty much attracted to coming to the class.
Right.
Well, it's a 3-day class, and I had no ideas what I was looking for, because what I really found, as I got to know Dr. Hyman even better, was really he's somebody that's on a similar path to me, just way further down the line. And that's probably my biggest attraction to him specifically in the work that he's teaching, because he's taken around 120, 140 different chiropractic techniques, taking the jewels out of all of them.
Right.
Because what I think happens is you get somebody in our profession that's really good at one thing, they kind of attract a group to them,
Right.
and then they have to figure out what to do with everything else. The nice thing with Dr. Hyman and with the BSA technique is what he's done is he's taken those mentors, those gurus, if you will, that are amazing at one thing, pulled the best stuff from all of them. And that's really what I kind of considered that I've been doing, except he's made it easy for me, because he's just laid a path, and I love having somebody that can save me the learning curve.
I want to just jump in on this, because I think this is just a general concept that is so important for everyone to understand. And, to have a professional, basically explaining that even experts have mentors, and I think people who weren't raised by people who are entrepreneurs and successful don't understand that the best of the best still are always searching for more knowledge and still always have a mentor or somebody that they can learn something from. So I thank you for sharing that. I think it's really important for people to hear that are trying to change their lives or start a new business or just on that concept. So I just kind of wanted to jump in and thank you for sharing that, because a lot of times a professional doesn't want to share that they're still in the educational learning process. And I think it's one of the things that the average person needs to hear.
Well, I agree that it's so important, and I've had coaches from my entire profession. Getting out of school is just the first step. A lot of people look at, okay, I went to chiropractic school, or I went to college, whatever the script might be, and now I'm done learning. Now I go into the real world. And I think anybody that wants to become more successful recognizes relatively quickly that school was step one.
Yes.
It gave you the credentials, it gave you what you might have needed to get into the boards, to pass those type of things. But what it doesn't necessarily give you is it doesn't necessarily give you how do you run a business.
Right.
How do you deal with the patient that physically walks in the door in my type of business? Because they give us all the theory possibly, and yes, we do get a lot of hands-on in chiropractic school. I think we have a spectacular education from that
Right.
as a groundwork.
Yes.
But what they don't necessarily do is, what do you do with the patient that crawls in the door? And I've literally had people come in on wheelbarrows because they just couldn't walk, so someone carted them into my office and say, here they are, doc, now what do you do?
Wow.
That's when having someone that's been down the road really is nice, sometimes to be able to pick up the phone and call right away, or maybe you've already done a little bit of that work. Sure, you can figure things out on your own, but why not jump light years ahead? There's a reason that prime athletes have coaches. I mean, and anybody that you could come up with a name of, any football team, any basketball team, any baseball team, any professional golfer, most of them not only have one coach, they have multiple coaches. And it's so important to look at that. And
every single athlete that I've ever interviewed who have been Olympians and whatnot, I mean, every single one of them, obviously you know that their coaches always played a tremendous part. But it's the same for professionals like yourself, because like you said, it's great when you learn the technique as a doctor to go out and serve and help people. But then there's the other aspect of marketing, your business, and making sure that you have the aspect of, how do I run my business? How do I market my business? How do I, all of that aspect of being successful. And, people forget that there's a whole nother element of being a professional other than just the techniques that you need to know as a doctor.
Oh, absolutely.
So, that it's great to hear you say that. And so if you could also just talk about, like I said, this education that you were learning from Dr. Hyman with the BSA.
So the nice thing about this, as I said, is that what Dr. Hyman's done is he's really taken just a tremendous number of inputs in his life experience and put it into a technique that's called body-specific analysis. It's technically a whole system. I'm only at the level 2. He says there's 12 levels. I'm interested to go to all of them. But coming back, literally on the Monday morning, with a little bit of extra study, I could walk into my office and start applying it to what I was already doing. That's one thing that I love about a technique is, I've been to some technique classes where they're like, well, if you're not doing it this way, then you're wrong. And I really have a challenge with that, because I don't think that there's a wrong way to get people better. There may be a longer way, but not necessarily a wrong way. And what I found is that the little pieces of each technique that we can add in give us one more tool. It's like a carpenter doesn't show up with a hammer. He has a whole truckload full of material that he shows up with to be able to construct a house or to even build a cabinet or what have you. As a doctor, especially in the more natural healing, where we're not just giving the next drug off the shelf, we're actually working with the body. I'm going to work with somebody this afternoon that's literally 4 weeks old. I'm also going to work with somebody this afternoon that's in their 80s and 90s.
Wow.
I'm going to have athletes walk into my office. I'm going to have couch potatoes walk into my office. I'm going to have business professionals walk into my office, literally from the age spectrum, from infancy to seniors. Having a multiple way to deal with these people is one of the things that's so important to me, which is why we have so many different systems available in my office, so many different techniques. But what Dr. Hyman's technique specifically does is it ties a lot of that material together, and it actually gives you a form to work with. It's a great place to tie into other things. What I would say I'd had a lot of challenges with up until this point was a lot more of the organic type problems. So somebody comes in and they're saying that they have indigestion. Well, where a medical doctor might just give them some kind of indigestion aid or some kind of pill, drug, potion, or lotion. What we want to do is, number one, find out why that's happening. Obviously, the first step is we might want to look at the stomach or the stomach area. But there was so much expansion from that. Maybe there's an emotional connection. Maybe there's a genetic connection. Maybe there's stuff that the body has just been holding on to that had been layered and layered. And with the BSA technique, with the ERCS technique that we learn, which are tied together as far as I use them, we can actually look at the physical, we can look at the mental, we can really look at the spiritual level of the body, and we can start to unwind that. And we can make a major difference with somebody many times in just a few visits.
Now, I know there are people that will be watching and listening to us and say, what does that spiritual or mental aspect have to do with it? But I think maybe, I don't know if you have any stats or anything, but I know that they have done scientific studies that addresses the fact that our emotions, our stress level, what we are going through mentally and emotionally has a very significant effect on our physical health and our bodies and what goes on inside of our organs. I mean, can you just speak to that just real quickly for somebody who's listening to us going right now?
Absolutely.
Going, what does that have to do with the pain that I have, in my back or in my neck or whatever the case may be?
Most of the health problems that we have, and one of the things that they say pretty much day one, whether you go to chiropractic school, acupuncture school, medical school, it really doesn't matter, because I've met with lots of other colleagues and we've kind of compared notes, if you will. Mm-hmm. They basically say in our very first day, and then they spend the next years discussing this in detail, that stress is the primary cause of all problems. It's like 90% of the cause. There's physical stresses. Those are the ones that a lot of people very easily just can assume. You know what, I was in a car accident, my head got boggled around, I fell down a flight of stairs,
right.
I had an accident, what have you. There's chemical stresses. We talked a lot about those when we were talking about the water.
Yes.
And we could spend days on that subject alone.
We don't even know we're exposed to, right?
Exactly. There's stuff that you have no idea that you're exposed to. But really, when I'm in a room of people and I ask people, what is stress? And the hands go up, I hear my job, I hear my family, I hear people saying it's the stress with being able to pay the bills at the end of the month. It's dealing with sick parents, dealing with kids in the environment that the kids have to grow up in today.
Right.
All of that is an emotional stress.
Right.
The body looks at stress basically exactly the same, whether it's a physical, chemical, or an emotional stress. It doesn't particularly differentiate one versus the other. Any stress point, anything that happens with us, our subconscious mind can key onto. What I say a lot of times is, if we date ourselves back 10,000 years, because in today's society so much stuff doesn't make sense, but genetically we're exactly the same as we were 10,000 years ago as far as human beings. What would happen? We'd be out, we'd have a nice spring day. We'd be drinking some water at a water pond. There'd be a little bunny on one side, there'd be a little deer on the other side, the trees are in bloom, it's just the perfect day. We hear a rustling in the bush. The bunny takes off, the deer takes off, and we're standing there looking around. And then a tiger jumps out from behind the grass. Mm-hmm. We run, somehow or another we get away from the tiger. Our subconscious mind is going to take a snapshot of everything that happened. Nothing physically occurred. We didn't get eaten by the tiger. But we had a life and death experience.
Yes.
That life and death experience gets stored in our limbic system. The limbic system is the emotional center of our body. It's very, very deep in the brain and runs all of the stuff that we're not thinking about. Fortunately, our brain runs almost everything without us having to think about it, because quite honestly, if I had to remember to breathe, I'd see a shiny penny on the ground, bend down to pick it up, and pass out.
Yes.
But our subconscious mind runs everything that goes on.
Right.
Because our subconscious mind runs everything that goes on, it remembers stresses. Okay, let's fast forward back to 2013. Most of the time, I'm not going to run across a tiger in the United States. I don't have to worry about that too much. But what happens if I sit down for a meal and I'd had a bad day and I'm pissed off, I'm aggravated, I'm mad, I'm angry, I have this whole list of emotions, and then I start to consume food? The body connects all of those negative emotions with the food. This is how allergies occur.
Oh, interesting.
Then the entire system says, the next time you come in contact with that, I was mad, I was angry, it was whatever.
Oh, you're saying that if you eat a food when you're in a bad emotional state, it can trigger something so that the next time you eat it, you have another bad reaction to it?
It absolutely can happen.
Wow.
Because chemical stresses and emotional stresses and the physical stress all get tied together.
Right.
So what we can do, and the whole purpose of systems like BSA, like ERCs, I have a system in my office called BioVeda. There's a variety of different ways that we can address this. Mm-hmm. Is we can untie those emotions. So let's say that same scenario, we sit down for dinner, but we do that every day. We do that for weeks on end, months on end, sometimes years on end. All of a sudden, someone comes into the office and now they have indigestion. Well, it starts to make some sense. It's not that they ate something today that caused a problem. It was the stacking of all of the chemical stresses, all of the physical stresses, all the emotional stresses that had built up.
So you're saying that the BSA system that you use can, kind of put that back into a healthier balance.
Absolutely. It's like unwinding.
Right.
If you can imagine a big ball of string, it's like unwinding that big ball of string.
Wow.
And when a patient walks into my office, it's very rare that they have one finite problem.
Right.
Does that happen? Sure.
Right.
But the vast majority of them come in, and we need to unwind.
Just helps you to address not only what's physically going on, but what caused it.
What caused it. And that's where we get into the emotional component, which is what got us into this.
Right. All right. Well, no, that's very helpful because I think that it explains, a lot of what, I've heard a little bit about, BSA, but I really myself didn't even understand it. So I appreciate that. Thank you for saying that. The other thing I wanted to kind of ask you about, because you've had a chance to, be exposed to the professional, educational aspect of everything that, Fred Van Liew is really dedicated and passionate to providing, not only just the average person, but to other professionals so that you can all work together to help people. Maybe you could just tell people who don't know him, maybe they've seen him on a video or they've seen him speaking in front of a room. Can you just speak a little bit about Fred Van Liew, the person that just as a professional and just as an individual? Can you just share a little bit of your thoughts on that?
From the first time that I started hearing Fred have the opportunity to speak, I knew that he had a passion for what he did. His whole water system came up because of a personal experience. I'm a chiropractor because of personal experience I had with chiropractic, so I started making a connection with that.
Right.
He's not only passionate about the water systems, he brings to the profession people like Dr. Hyman. He provides that, he sponsors it, and I don't know exactly how that all works, but it happens right here in his facility most of the time. He's dedicated to the professional on improving the technique. He does that through the BSA. He's dedicated to the profession by helping teach how to run the business. I actually had a personal interview with him, and we spent 3 or 4 hours on a Saturday. This is his time. We sat down because it was about the only time that I could get with him. So we sat down on a Saturday in his home, and he asked me, what is it that you do? What is it that you want people to be able to know? So we could actually work out a bit of a business plan.
Right.
A marketing plan. And he has such a wealth of information when it comes to, number one, being able to run a very successful business, because he's been doing that for decades. Mm-hmm. He's a wealth of information about learning how to market. He brings in Joel Bauer and that type of information. So he is dedicated very, very strongly.
No, and I want to say Joel Bauer is just a marketing genius, and he helps people, for people who don't know who he is, to really learn how to market, their gifts, at a really high and effective level, which is tragic for any business person who has so much education, knowledge, and services to provide, to serve people, but they don't have any. I mean, I'm sure you've seen this many, many times, so have I. People that have just such a phenomenal service to provide, but they don't know how to market themselves, so they don't maintain the success level, or the whole business completely falls apart. So,
well, we go to school. We spend all of these years learning how to do whatever it is that we do.
Right.
Many of the chiropractic schools, Parker does a relatively good job with it about giving us some business information.
Right.
But it's not their job.
Right.
It's a secondary thing that they're doing. Their job is to make competent doctors that can go out, help people, not hurt anybody, really provide the juice, if you will.
Right.
The problem is some of the best doctors that I know, nobody knows about.
Yeah, and if you don't have some kind of a system in place to market yourself, the best doctors in the world are not going to be able to serve people because they can't keep a business afloat.
And like I said, some of the best doctors I know, some of them have worked on me personally. They're barely staying in business. Yeah. They're in a stress response all the time themselves,
right,
which actually limits their ability. So they're pretty amazing as it is,
yes,
but they don't know how to communicate that amazing to the public.
Right.
So they get this word of mouth thing. I think one of the biggest lies in my profession specifically is we get the idea that we go to school, we get good at whatever it is that we do, And that's all we have to do is just go out with the idea that we want to serve people. People don't come to chiropractic for any other reason. People want to, I'm sure there's exceptions to every role, but the vast majority of people in chiropractic specifically want to serve people.
Right, want to help people.
And we get the idea that in school all we have to do is become good at what we do.
And then everything's going to work out.
And that's part of it. The other challenge is once in a while we do have to flip hats.
So when you were talking about spending that time with Fred, in helping you with a business plan, I'm sorry because I interrupted you, but you could, just kind of continue to share how that.
Well, of course, it was a relatively short session, but I got so much information out of it because we talked about what is it that we do, how do we manage patients. We talked about what do I communicate to the public. Because quite honestly, if I just go out and say, I'm a chiropractor, what does that mean to anybody?
Right.
But if I can go out and say that I have a system that in 3 to 5 minutes can get rid of chronic fatigue. And then I'd be quiet. That's the key. And obviously one of my biggest challenges is just being quiet. And let the person come to us. It's like setting out the bait for the fish. You can't make them get on the hook. But when I meet somebody in public, I can say, especially if I heard something relevant about them, I have a system that we can, without any drugs, without any surgery, help XYZ, whatever the condition that would either fit or come close to fit, and then back off a little bit.
Right.
Because I tend to be naturally a little bit more aggressive towards it. And Fred is too. It's training.
Yes.
And you talked about coaches earlier. He's a great coach. He's a great mentor. And again, he's been down the road, and he's got such a passion towards helping people. That's really what it boils down to.
And like you said, it's great because, the thing about Fred is that not only does he have that same passion and caring as a professional, as somebody who wants to serve people, but he also has the balance of understanding the marketing, how to, create and maintain a successful business. I wanted to ask you, because I don't know the answer to this, but have you attended any of Joel Bauer's training events?
I haven't yet. I've learned stuff from Fred, and that's as far as I've gone so far with that.
I want to encourage you to participate in one. I think that it would be a wonderful experience, for you. Just picking up, I've watched him have a tremendous impact on many, many small business owners and large business owners, just by picking up one additional adjustment in their marketing.
Well, and honestly, I will say that out of everything, the marketing is my personal biggest weakness.
Right.
I've got a fairly successful practice. I've been told I'm in the top 8 to 10% of chiropractors as far as the volume of people that we're seeing in my office and what have you. But I know that there's another step.
Yes.
So I'm definitely open to that, and I know that he's got spectacular and tremendous information.
Right.
So I look forward to doing that.
Yeah, that'll be wonderful. So in just finishing up, I just wanted to ask you, for people who are watching this video and they're hearing what you're saying about the health and well-being and some of the products, but they maybe have a little skepticism and they're not really sure that it all sounds good, but they just have that level of skepticism that so many people do right now. What would you say to that person when it comes to experiencing either any of the products that Fred provides or any of the trainings that you've personally experienced? What would you say to that person?
Well, the first thing I would let them know is that, first of all, there's no risk. One of the things that I know about Fred, without even conferring with him at the moment, is he guarantees everything that he has. All of his products come with, I believe, a 6-month guarantee. Don't quote me on that part, but it's a long enough time for you to experience it, bring it into your home, use it. I know that we've distributed lots of water filters out of my office. I've never had one come back. So
yeah.
I'm very confident that, and I've told patients that we're on that edge. It's like, do I want to invest this? And that's the thing, is it's an investment, because if we don't invest in our health now, it's going to cause problems later.
Right.
Number two, just knowing that he works with some of the best professionals that I know. He's been involved with the chiropractic profession for longer than I have, because I met him when I was a freshman student.
Right.
And I think he'd been doing this work for years at that point. I have no idea exactly how long. But he's got the stamp of the profession behind him, basically, just because he's been here. People don't stay in business by not taking good care of their clients, by not taking good care of their customers, especially in this type of environment,
Right.
because there are a lot of other products out there. But when you've got the highest quality stuff right here, I wouldn't look anywhere else. I just know that his products work. I know that there's been a couple of times, there's been a few of the vitamins that I wanted to get that I couldn't because they won't accept anything less than the best standards. And when you're dealing with natural products, which are basically food-based products, once in a while you do have to wait a week or so to get the best stuff.
Right.
The last thing that I would say about that is it was one of his CDs that I was listening to. And I remember him talking about his water filters, and he went to the testing facility. And Fred would probably give the story better than I will because I'm quoting a secondhand thing, but it's what struck in my mind is the integrity of this business and the integrity of the man. Mm-hmm. The testing facility asked him, what do you want the results of your filter to be? And he describes that he was a little awestruck. He was stepped back. It's like, what do you mean? He didn't understand the question. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, we can basically make the filters come up with whatever result you want, because we can run the water through 2 or 3 times, then test it. We could filter the water first, then test it. We could start with, there was a bunch of different things, and he basically said, apparently you didn't understand what I want. I want my water filters tested. And I'm going to put on the box whatever it is that they do.
Right.
And when they came out on top anyways, he didn't need anything else, and he basically ended up surprising them. That was the integrity to me. And when I heard that little story, that meant so much to me about how dedicated to quality Fred is.
Right.
So.
Well, and I think that in itself says it all, because I think that, in this day and age when people are skeptical, knowing that there are people out there that still really believe in their product and their services being authentic, the best of the best, and providing, the highest quality of service. I think it's nice to know there are people still out there that do that. And I thank you for, sharing your experience of, Fred and his products and his services. And I think as well, I have a great deal of respect for your passion for you taking care of your patients and, being on that road to always looking, to the next high level of how we can, serve and provide health and wellness for people. So thank you so much, Doctor, for spending this time with us.
Well, thank you for inviting me.